Hey everyone, I'm Nurse Dani and I have Reva Cook with me, licensed clinical social worker, and we have a history. We've had the opportunity to work together with patients in the past. She is fantastic and I'm so excited for you guys to be able to hear from her today. We're going to be talking about self-care, and during the live stream you guys can ask questions and we'll get to some of those at the end. And so let's start by having you introduce yourself to everyone so they can get to know how wonderful you are.
Oh, you're so nice.
No, it's true.
I am a licensed clinical social worker. I actually work for both Intermountain and for the Healing Group. And for Intermountain, I work at the Live Well Center down at Utah Valley Hospital in Provo, and we do all kinds of great stuff there, helping people learn how to live healthy lifestyles, from nutrition to mental health to medical stuff, exercise stuff. Is really an awesome clinic.
Kind of like a one-stop shop.
It is kind of a one-stop shop. And I do classes and therapy there. And then for the Healing Group, I started working for them about 2 years ago. And we really focus on women and relationships and sexuality. And my particular passion that drew me to them and that got us connected too originally was the perinatal population, women who are pregnant and then that year after pregnancy. And so I see women at our Linden office, which we opened, it's been a whole year now.
That's so exciting.
So exciting. We wanted a Utah County presence really badly.
And in addition to Linden, where are the other locations?
Midvale, and then we also have a location in Park City. So we do individual counseling there. Some of our locations also offer couples counseling, and we have support groups at all of those locations for our postpartum moms. We also offer a support group for dads as well that's run by Braxton, one of our great therapists, and a support group for those who are struggling with infertility issues, various groups for women with relationship difficulties. We often have a faith transitions group going. So lots of stuff like that. So I get to do so many fun things with my work.
Your job sounds so rewarding.
I really enjoy it.
So our specific topic today is self-care, and that's kind of a buzzword. I think it's often misinterpreted. Explain what self-care means.
We get these ideas from media about self-care. And I do think you're right. I think it's become a buzzword and kind of this trendy idea. And the ideas that we're given for it is that it's like certain things.
Like I imagine I need 2 hours to go to a spa and $100 to get a massage.
And yeah, that's kind of sometimes where people go. They're like, it has to be expensive. It has to be time consuming.
And if you don't have either of those, you end up not doing anything
I can't
for
do self-care.
Yeah.
So that's, and self-care is something that I preach relentlessly to both our Live Well Center clients and my Healing Group clients, that you need to take care of yourself. That's self-care. Take care of yourself. And that if you're going to only see it in this really narrow frame of mind of it has to be expensive, it has to be time consuming, it has to feel like a luxury, you're not going to be able to do it very often. Happen. And I maintain that we need self-care, if not most days. I mean, if not every day, I should say, most days.
I kind of think of myself as being a cell phone. I've used this analogy with some moms before on Intermountain Moms. Like, what do you do? What do you have to do at the end of every day? You have to plug your phone in, and sometimes multiple times because you're draining your battery quickly.
Running through it so fast.
You open 70 apps, and it's going full speed. And if it runs out of battery, it just shuts off.
Right.
And we can get to that same point
sometimes
if we don't recharge.
Without warning.
Exactly. Yes, at least your phone gives you a warning.
If you pay attention to it.
Yeah.
Right?
There's probably warning signs within us that we just aren't paying attention.
Our bodies and our brains give us warning signs. And one thing I think is really fun to learn about ourselves is to learn what our tells are. And that's like a card playing term. When people play poker, they will watch the tell of the other people at the game and see like, oh, that's how I can tell they're bluffing, or or they like do this, or different tells. But I think we have our tells for when we are getting overwhelmed, when our battery is running down. And they're just like the alerts that pop up on your cell phone, 20%, 5%. But we ignore those. Yeah. We neglect ourselves. The opposite of taking care of yourself is neglecting yourself. And so I think we neglect those warning signs. And it's really fun self-discovery to start to pay attention to those. I know for me, when I start misplacing things, that is a tell. And so if I'm like, where's my keys? I'm like, whoa, okay. I need to find the keys, but also what else is going on that I am not paying attention?
Do you think sometimes we neglect ourselves because of guilt? Like we feel guilty for taking care of ourselves?
I never quite understand what people mean by that, but they do tell me that.
I hear moms say that all the time. And me personally, I've felt this at different times because I'm gone all day from my family, and there may be a lunch break here and there when I can recharge, but most of the time I'm just going. And so any time that I have to myself is going to be at night when I also want to be with my family. And so I experience guilt wanting to be alone.
So you feel like you're doing something wrong if you take care of yourself.
Although I realize now, because I've talked to you and many other amazing people, that it's unselfish to take care of yourself because I'm no good to anyone unless I recharge and take care of myself.
That is really true. We can't give from an empty well is one of the things that I really like. And so we can feel like, well, I am short-circuiting my family if I take care of myself. But the real truth of it is, if you don't make some time to take care of yourself, you're not going to be very effective with your family.
Yes.
You're going to be too tired. You're going to be too worn out. Your thinking isn't going to be clear. So you get a bigger benefit to the time you do spend with your family if we do what we need to do to take care of ourselves. And I love to blow the whole idea that people don't have time for self-care out of the water, because I think that's a common myth. And you brought up the guilt one, like the myth that my family will suffer if I take care of myself, which the opposite
when
actually
you say that out loud, it makes no sense. But I think more often than not, moms think that. But then you're like, well, that makes no sense.
It's crazy, the things that when we say them out loud and we're like, wait, that really doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
My paradigm for self-care is anything that lights you up, that renews you, refuels you, and rejuvenates you. That is self-care. So
this is going to look different for everyone then.
Totally different for everyone. So I love the self-care lists because they're a good way to kind of spark our thinking about it, but it is not one size fits all.
We kind of talked about this a little bit before we went live. If you asked me right now what I would do to recharge, I'm so used to doing things that I have to do. I'm not even sure I know what I want to do.
You'd be like,
or what I like to do.
Know.
I'd spend the 15 minutes trying to figure out what I wanted to do, and then my time's up. So it's helpful, I think, to have a list or to have something to start off with, and then that can spark your interest, and you can be like, oh, that's a good idea. I have the ability to invest in myself by doing that.
Right.
So where can we start? What are some ideas?
So I think working on that idea in our head of what our preconceived notions are about what self-care is. When I talk to moms, that's one question I always ask them is, what are you doing for you? And guess what the number one answer is that I get?
Ooh, let me think about this for a second. Sleep?
No, I wish I heard that one. No.
What is it?
Exercise.
Exercise. Okay, that's
and so then my follow-up question to them is, do you enjoy that? And it's maybe half and half.
Most of the time
they're like, no, I really don't like it. I hate it. I'm like, okay, that's not self-care,
honey. They're taking care of their physical bodies, but they're not recharging.
Like, there's great reasons to do exercise. Wonderful reasons. But if it's not refreshing and renewing to you, it's not self-care. Maybe you have, lots of good reasons to do it, but that's not refueling your cup.
Yes.
So don't count that as your self-care.
Or if you're budgeting, because I've done that now that you say that. I exercise 5 to 6 days a week. I wake up early. I do it before my kids even wake up. And in my mind, I'm thinking, okay, that was 45 minutes of me time. So I've budgeted in my head already a certain number of minutes. And so that like wipes it off my plate, even though that didn't recharge me.
That's what I was just going to ask you.
Emotionally.
Does your exercise recharge you?
I think it makes me feel better for the rest of the day. So maybe in that sense, but I don't, when I'm done, I'm not like, I'm ready to conquer the day, you know? I want to go back and lay in my bed while everyone else is still sleeping.
And there are women, though, that is like, they feel that's a wonderful self-care for them.
I've always wished that running outside would recharge me. So many people say that, and I wish I did.
But there's so many important reasons for you to do it.
Yeah.
Right? Besides self-care. But I think we can especially feel run down when we try to trick ourselves into thinking we're doing something that's self-care when it's really not self-care for us.
Yeah.
So looking at what other people are doing can be helpful, but then we have to hold it up to that lens of us and our life. Does this refresh, rejuvenate, renew? Do I feel better after doing this?
I really like that because there's probably also some danger in comparing ourselves to others when they talk about what recharges them. And if that doesn't work for us, then that might actually work to our detriment.
Totally.
If we talk ourselves down because we didn't like it.
Totally. We can be hard on ourselves. We can also be hard on other people. I had a conversation with a friend a couple of months ago who was like, all these women, they're like getting pedicures and they're just being selfish and not self-indulgent. And I was like, what you're telling me sounds like a pedicure to you is not self-care. That is not rejuvenating and refreshing to you. And it wasn't. She's like, it's expensive. It's a waste of time. And I said, but what about these women that it is that for? Like you can't take that away from them and you can't say it's not worthy. I think any activity can be self-care for somebody.
Yes. So one of the things that we kind of discussed over email before was that you can actually do something with your kids that rejuvenates you.
Totally.
I love that suggestion too.
Yeah, and you mentioned earlier, we kind of didn't get back to it, about like, okay, how do we get these ideas? And I think one way is to kind of, you can do some research, of course. You can type in self-care ideas in Google and get lots of things. I have a list I'm happy to email people that has like a couple hundred things that'll humans typically enjoy. But you can also brainstorm categories with yourself. And with the Healthy Lifestyle program that we lead at the Live Well Center in Provo, one of the classes that I teach is on self-care. In fact, I have to go back to Provo tonight to teach a class, and it's the self-care class. And one of the activities we do in the class is I write categories on the board, and I split the class up into groups of 3 or 4, and I say, you have 2 minutes to come up with 10 things in each of these categories.
That sounds fun. What are the categories?
So the categories are involves food, does not involve food, can do with other people, takes 5 minutes or less.
Ooh, these are good.
Can do outside. Like I can go forever coming up with categories depending on how big our class is. And then I'll time them and say, you have 2 minutes. Okay. And they're like, 2 minutes, I can't. And I have never had a group that couldn't come up with 10 things in their category in 2 minutes.
What's something, how would you answer the question, what could rejuvenate you in 5 minutes or less?
Okay.
What would you say for that?
The things that typically come up are take some deep breaths. Do a 5-minute meditation.
The power of breathing.
So powerful. So some deep, slow breaths. Listen to a song that you like. In Provo, this is a popular one because we have those beautiful mountains right outside the hospital. So they're like, look at the mountains and notice what's happening there. There's always something in every season, and they're just so spectacular. Give someone a hug. Text a friend. Look at memes on your phone. Like they just keep coming. If you start thinking, okay, 5 minutes, what am I going to go to the bathroom?
Sometimes it's, take a drink, eat something, and use the restroom because you haven't done that all day. Yeah. Okay, see, this is good. This gets your thoughts going. So what are some things that people say for things that don't involve food? Because whenever I think of socializing, I also think of food. I am the type of person where After I finish my last meal, I'm thinking about what I'm going to eat next.
You're like, let's plan the next one. And where is our snack going to be?
Eat with? Because I love that. That is definitely rejuvenating to me.
Yeah.
So what do people say that doesn't involve food?
And that's one of the things, like an article that I read once about self-care said self-care is not all cupcakes and bubble baths. And I think that's kind of one of the misconceptions.
Yeah.
So things that don't involve food. Well, several of the ones we mentioned for 5 minutes would work, right? Also taking a walk or taking a hike, reading a book that you like, watching a TV show that you like, bubble baths.
Yes.
Don't have to involve food. Walking down the aisles of a store that you enjoy.
Window shopping.
Shopping.
That's a big one for a lot of people.
Yeah. Looking through old photos.
Oh, that's a good one. See, we just need an opportunity. Maybe one of the first activities people should participate in is sitting down and creating these categories and writing down some ideas.
Yeah.
That's a good place to start.
Because I think when we think self-care, our brain kind of spazzes,
right?
Trying to be like, what do we do? But a category, then your brain starts to sort out, oh, this information fits, this doesn't, and it actually is more efficient to brainstorm with a category. So like if I were to ask you, Dani, what are some things that rejuvenate, refresh, or renew you that you do with your kids?
I like to play Foursquare with them.
Okay.
I like to go on a bike ride. We really like to go to the movie theater and buy movie theater popcorn and then come home and watch a movie together.
Okay.
And, of course, go to the gas station and get our favorite frosty beverage. And I really like reading to my son at night before he goes to bed, and just taking a minute to talk with my daughter when she gets home from school. Hearing about her and her friends and her day is rejuvenating to me, unless it was a super draining day for her, and then I'm draining myself to fill her. That took 30 seconds,
right.
And I just listed 5 things
that
I've never really thought of before as healing me. I think this is fresh on my mind because my kids just spent 3 days with someone else, and so they went on vacation with some friends of ours, and I just picked them up today, and I realized while they were gone that I just love my little people. They make me so happy and they fill me. And sometimes at the end of the day, when you've done so much at work and you come home and you still feel like you have so much to do, it feels draining to attend to them and to help them. But I miss that. And I think it does recharge me more than I thought.
Yeah. I love this point that you brought up. You're like, I didn't think of that.
Yeah.
Because when I badger my clients and people who are unfortunate enough to be my friends, about self-care, I'm like, you need to do something for yourself, and then you need to tell yourself, this is my thing.
Yeah.
This is my self-care. So, when you listen to your kids tell you about their day, and you're watching their little faces, and then to yourself, you'll be like, this is my self-care. Because I think we've got to educate ourselves and tune into those experiences and in life that do revive us, that do refresh us. It's part of learning how to be present.
I love that's what I was just thinking, being present, putting down the phone, looking at my kids eye to eye and not missing out on that moment to connect. And that's the reward of being a mother, is like in interacting with them on that level. And so for all the work that we do behind the scenes that they don't appreciate, the reward is that moment for me.
Yeah. And then to remind yourself, this is my self-care. This feels good to me.
Yeah.
It's so nutty that we have to point that out to ourselves.
It is.
So we are kind of oblivious and we're, on to the next thing and stuff like that. So I think another misconception possibly of self-care is that it's only things you do by yourself. And for so many people, alone time is a critical part of their self-care plan. That is really important. I've had a lot of clients who that just fills them up in a way that not much else does. So that's an important thing. But to realize, I can feel revitalized and rejuvenated when I'm spending time with my kids and when I'm spending time with my spouse. That's an important thing too. Yeah. The more ways we learn about ourselves that fill our emotional well, that is so many more options we have, so many more opportunities we have to feel good about our lives and ourselves and to have the physical and emotional reserve that we need to do all of the hard things that happen in our lives.
Yeah. I'm thinking also of like to-do lists, you know. I am a task-oriented person, and the night before, I always think of all the things that I need to do the next day and prioritize them. And if anything that's self-care for me is on that list, it often tends to fall to the bottom. And I think it needs to be a conscious decision to keep that at the top of the list and to make sure that that happens for you. And I really like how you were walking me through earlier different categories, because if one category is things I can do in 15 minutes or less, then you schedule that 15 minutes for yourself and make sure it happens.
Yeah. You also may find as you start to turn your attention towards things that make me feel good, that you encounter a lot of those things in your regular life. But you haven't like clued yourself into it. You know, you mentioned the frosty drinks at the gas station, sort of a fan of that.
Yeah.
So, you know, if I'm going through the swig line, I can go through the swig line on my way to work because I want to drink on my way to work, and I have a drink and that's nice. Or I can go through the line and be like, this is my thing. I really enjoy doing this. This is really fun for me.
It makes me think of like hearing your favorite song on the radio and then turning it up. So you like really absorb it all.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. So you may notice you have all kinds of things in your life that renew you and refresh you and rejuvenate you, but by turning your focus to them, then you can feel the full effects of them. So they may already even be there.
Oh, I love that. You just need to look for them in your life.
Yeah.
Oh, I love that. Well, we have a question from someone who asked during the live stream. Sydney says, with 3 kids, how do I do this? Because self-care seems non-existent. So what would you say to Sydney?
Well, Sydney, tell us 5 things that, like Dani did. Sit down and think, when I am with my kids, what activities can I do that refresh me? So then you can start to think, okay, is there any self-care things I can do with my children? And then also realize there are probably self-care things for you that are really important that you need to do without your kids. Recognizing the value that taking the time to do those things is in your life is really important. We make time for things that are important. You know, you said putting it on your to-do list. Maybe she needs to make an appointment with herself.
Yeah, I love that. Make an appointment with yourself and make that a priority. Make it happen.
People always say, I'm so busy, but we are all so busy, but somehow we manage to get done.
Okay, that makes me think, when we all say we're so busy and you start to analyze the things you're spending time doing, maybe that will help you recognize what recharges you. Because sometimes I talk to my friends who say they're so busy, but then in the next sentence they say, I watched Netflix for 3 hours and like finished, binge watching my favorite show. So in their mind they were busy, but they found something that was recharging them.
Possibly.
Yeah.
It would be really interesting to see if that was recharging them or if they were kind of zoning out.
That's true.
It goes back to that whole thing of what is really recharging you?
Yeah.
What are you spending time on? Some people find, especially when they're first starting to experiment with self-care, and I encourage people to experiment with it. If you're like not sure that's going to make a difference for you, experiment with it. Say, this week, I am going to do something that is for me, that makes me feel good, if not every day, most days, and I'm not going to go more than 2 days without doing it, and see what happens to my mood. See what happens to my anxiety levels, see what happens to the way I interact with other people, see if it helps. When you see that it makes a difference, that's when you really are like, oh, I am investing in myself. I'm investing in my relationships when I make this an important thing.
And it becomes an incentive to continue on.
Right.
And I'm wondering if, I'm thinking about double duty, too. Like, when you were talking about whether or not that really recharged my friend or not, I'm reflecting on times when there's a ton of laundry to do. And I'm kind of like a work first, play later kind of person. And that's why it falls to the bottom of my list, because work is this long. And then, there's this much time left for play. But I have tried to, like when there's a lot of cleaning to be done or a lot of laundry or something, if I turn on a show that I like while I fold laundry, it doesn't seem as laborious, and that tends to fill me. Or I turn on like an audiobook while I'm cleaning the house and I look forward to it. I'm like, ooh, what else can I clean because I want to listen to another chapter. And now that I think about it, that has filled me. Yeah, so.
There you go.
Yeah. I'm having so many self-discoveries. If you guys had the opportunity to sit here for 20 minutes with her, you would too. So what else do they need to know about self-care?
Let's talk about this idea that you're like, because it's play, it's got to go to the bottom of my list.
Okay.
Right? So some of the things that are higher up on your list, you mentioned working out.
Yeah.
Right?
Yep.
I assume you eat.
Yes, I love eating. I mentioned that. Yep.
If your kids, you make sure they get to their activities, things like that, right?
Yep.
Because you see the benefit of those things.
Yes.
Right? Putting self-care as something that is not a necessity, something that's non-essential, is how it ends up falling to the bottom of our list.
Yes.
When we do that experiment where we say, okay, for a week or for 2 weeks, I'm going to put some focus on this, and we see what it does to us, for us. I have never worked with a mom who hasn't come back and told me, I am happier, I am less snappy at my kids, I am less irritable. And I'm like, can you see how this isn't
not non-essential.
It's not non-essential, right? This isn't a luxury.
Yeah.
Is it a luxury to be happy? Is it a luxury to have patience with your kids? Man.
When you put it that way.
No, I don't think so.
Everything.
So then we move it up here. And sometimes you have to adjust other stuff, to be able to get it in there. Sometimes it's like you said, just turning our attention to it. Or saying, okay, I have to do this thing I'm not in love with, but what's something I do love to do?
Yeah.
I can watch my favorite show while I do it. Or maybe I have to run some errands I don't like, but if I do a quick spin through the dollar spot, that makes me happy too. So I will plan on that.
Yeah.
So it's this idea that self-care has to be this big, gigantic thing that we have to set aside a lot of time for it. And only if we get all of our chores done first, those make it so we end up neglecting what we need, and we feel burned out and drained, and we don't have anything to give.
What about, what if Sydney had a newborn? And because you deal with a lot of people that are experiencing postpartum depression and anxiety, what do you tell them about self-care? Because it is really hard to even find 15 minutes when you've got a newborn.
I tell them it's even more important.
Yes.
You're right. It is really hard. And when I talk with moms who have new babies, I have a checklist that I go through with them. That's a mom's well checklist. And I have them on little cards. We've printed them out at the Healing Group, and we give them to all of our clients. And it lists, this is the Well Mom checklist. And I say, put it on your fridge. And when you are in this stage of brand new babying, you may not be able to get all of these things done in a day. And it has things like, have I showered today? Have I eaten today? Have I had a conversation with someone about something other than my baby today? Have I slept at least 4 hours in a stretch today? It's got about 7 or 8 things on there. And I tell them, you may not be able to get all of these things, even you can't get them all in one day. It's honestly challenging, even if you don't have small children, to do all of those things in one day. But this is our ideal. This is where we would like to get to. Just because we're not at our ideal doesn't mean it's not worth working towards.
Yes, or insurmountable.
Right. Yeah. So I'll tell them, I want you to look at this list, and I want you to be able to do those things hit each of them at least once in a week.
That feels doable. Yeah.
So
when you said long stretch, or at least a 4-hour stretch with a newborn, I actually had a conversation with someone the other day about conflicting messages that new moms get about breastfeeding and self-care. Because it takes so much time and energy to nurse a baby, and there's so many benefits to that. But if you're up every 2 hours feeding your baby, you don't ever get solid sleep. And lack of sleep alone can lead to depression and anxiety. And if you just let mom sleep, and get some solid sleep, it will
so
reset her system and help her. Yeah,
it really is.
Kind of start fresh. And so I also want to throw out there that part of self-care is letting go of those misconceptions that you're a bad mom if you don't do whatever it is. And I'm going to fill in the blank and say, in this case, if you don't nurse your baby every 2 hours, let dad take a shift. Wake up and pump, and that only takes 15 minutes, and then go back to sleep and get some solid sleep for 4 hours. Let yourself do that.
Yeah.
And because I think we do hear so many conflicting messages, and when you compare them side by side, it isn't possible in some situations to do this conflict. And to care for yourself. And it sounds to me like we're also talking about involving other people in our self-care plan.
Yes. I think it is crucial to, maybe that's too harsh of a word, because sometimes you don't get support from other people in your life when you do self-care, and you have to figure out how to do it yourself. You have to figure out, okay, well, all right, maybe nobody's going to help me with this, so I have to do it because I can see the benefit of it. But getting other people on board can be so helpful. Partners, in particular. I have found, though, when partners see the difference it makes,
they're on board too.
They're way more on board with it. They're like, oh, okay.
Well, and sometimes the frustration, if you boil it down, may be that like mom feels like she is run ragged and dad gets all these opportunities for self-care.
True.
and it feels just a little like the scale's a little uneven.
Right.
And so sometimes that hurts relationships too if you let that fester.
Yeah, so you have to be willing to ask for what you want, to explain why it's important to you, and hopefully your spouse will listen to you and support you in that. And I find most of the time that is true, that partners really do want what's best for each other, and they will support each other in that.
They may not have known that mom was feeling ragged and run down, and sometimes they just need us to outline what we need help with.
Yeah, and to say, I need an hour by myself. I'm going to leave the house, or I'm going to lock myself in the room and read, or whatever, but please don't ask me any questions.
And that shouldn't be what happens when mom's reached a critical point. This should be a norm.
Right.
Yeah.
One of the things on our Well Mom list that we often talk to our moms about is to try to get 2 hours by themselves at least once or twice a week. And most moms, when I tell them that, like their head like goes, poof.
Yeah.
They're like, that's impossible. And I'm like, well, let's see if we can work towards that. Because it does make such a big difference, especially when you're in those young baby and toddler stages where you are constantly being pulled with demands. And like you said, we get conflicting messages. Good moms do this and good moms do this. Well, those things are opposites. So now what?
Yes.
Right? And you mentioned specifically with the breastfeeding, we do get conflicting messages. We know from the research that your brain needs 4 hours of uninterrupted sleep for it to start its restorative processes. And then we're like, well, but when you're starting to nurse a baby, you need to do it every 2 hours. So you do the math, and how does that work?
It doesn't add up.
It doesn't add up. So that's when I tell my moms, okay, so we're going to accept that this is a time-limited situation. You're not going to be building your milk supply and working towards this nursing pattern with your baby forever. So this is a time-limited thing. So we're going to say for this time frame, we're going to focus on this. It means we're going to have to ignore this piece of advice about 4 hours of sleep. Maybe we'll try to do what we can. That means all of the other things I can do become even more important.
So you still have to fill it somehow.
Yes.
And especially so.
If you can't meet the ideal, then it's like, okay, I really need to make sure I'm having my liquids. I really need to make sure that I am eating protein. I really need to make sure I'm having some gentle movement. I really need to make sure I have some outside contact with the world. If you can't do one of the things, then see where you can fill in.
Oh, I really like that. And setting up the expectation with yourself to begin with that this is temporary. And that's important too. Anything else out there that you would say to moms about self-care?
So one of the things, we mentioned on it a little bit about self-care that you do routinely. And I think another myth of self-care is, well, if I do self-care, then I'm never going to get overwhelmed. I'm never going to be stressed. Self-care is really important, and it really helps us with those bumps and hurdles of life, but it does not prevent bad things from happening to us. So part of thinking of the categories of self-care and building out our self-care plan can be like, okay, what are my self-care things that I can do frequently, whether it's my gas station drink or my noticing the colors that are happening on the mountains or watching my child's eyes as they tell me a funny story. What are my self-care things I can do frequently? And then also, what works for me when I need real reparative work? When I have had those hard, difficult things happen to me, what are my big guns?
Oh, that's really good. And then that gives you something it would probably help your brain more naturally go there and make it happen if you've already thought about it ahead of time.
Oh, sure. So then when you have, say, something really stressful and difficult happen, you can be like, well, my Diet Coke is not going to cut it here. So I know that what's really helpful for me in this situation when I have these bigger upsets in my life is maybe a yoga class that I like, or maybe going on a hike, or maybe it's buying a new book. To know kind of our levels too. Like, and have these kind of like smaller things that work for me. What are my things that I need when I'm in crisis or when I'm really, really struggling? Because as you mentioned, when we're in those states, we can't think of anything.
Yeah. You just kind of sit there and draw a blank. I don't know. I have no idea.
Yeah. It's like as soon as someone asks you the question, your mind goes,
yeah, but probably 15 minutes ago you're thinking, oh, it'd be so nice if I could do now.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it sounds like one of the key takeaways here is being aware of it, looking for opportunities to be present in your life and to find things you do every day naturally. You don't have to build in or add to that recharge you.
Yeah, start to notice what does that for you.
Yeah. And then sit down and make a list of things that you need to make, that you can go to when you need to make time for yourself.
It's really fun. It's a fun self-discovery journey.
Yeah.
So on my Instagram account, Reva Cook LCSW, I post twice a week self-care ideas. Not because I think those are like the only self-care ideas out there, but because it's like, hey, maybe try this. Hey, if you've never tried it before, try it. See how it feels. Maybe you can add it to your list.
That's part of self-discovery too.
Right? Or maybe you're like, that is not me. And great. I think knowing the things that don't work for you is just as important as knowing what does work for you.
That's a very valuable tip too. So I have to ask you before we end, what do you like to do to recharge?
I really do like alone time, but I also really like friend time. So like going to dinner with friends or out to lunch with my friends is really, really helpful for me. But my all-time favorite self-care, which I discovered a couple of years ago after my dad died, and I've learned this is one of my reparative self-cares, is to go to the movies by myself in the middle of the day.
Oh, that does sound awesome.
It is really nice. Yeah. But I also can get a lot of self-care juice out of a sugar-free Big Al from Swig. So there's that.
That's probably something you could do on a more regular basis.
I can do that on a much more, getting to the movies in the middle of the day takes some effort. But we've talked a lot about soda, huh?
We have. I think this is saying something about us.
Are we thirsty?
Yeah.
But those smaller things are also really, really, really powerful. And I love it when there's stuff that you can do every day. A friend gave me a scented candle. And usually I'm like, oh, I saved those for special occasions. Well, this one I'm keeping in the bathroom. And every time I'm getting ready in the morning, I light it. It's self-care.
I love that. You know, one of the best pieces of advice that I've used in my life in the last year or so after I heard it was There's nothing that you need to save for a special occasion because every day is a special occasion.
I love that.
And so I had dishes that I wouldn't touch, and I was going to save them for Thanksgiving or whatever. And I'm like, that's pointless. I want my kids to have memories with these things every day so that when they grow up, it's special to them. Or like scented candles. I do the same thing. I reserve it for when like everyone's coming over to my house and the vacuum lines are perfect and it's going to smell this way. But then if you pull it out and you start enjoying it every day.
You can light it in your bathroom with all of your crap all over the counter. It's
great. All of a sudden it elevates it to the next level.
It does. And I think that idea is a good one for self-care, that we don't need to save it for special occasions, that we can enjoy the benefits of it every day in our lives, and it will have great trickle-down effects and help us be the kind of women that we want to be and show up in our lives the way we want to show up.
That's what this is all about anyway, right? Self-care is about being our best selves.
Exactly.
For ourselves and everyone around us.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. That gives me so much to think about. I'm sure it has given you guys so much to think about. Make your list today. What are you going to do for yourself?
Yeah, and if you're getting stuck, they can message me on Instagram, and I will email them the one that I have.
Oh, that's
and it
so
might
helpful.
Start those juices flowing.
And where else can people find you?
At thehealinggroup.com.
Healinggroup.com. And of course, you guys know where to find me if you have questions. Intermountain Moms on Facebook and Instagram. Thank you, everyone, for joining. Have a great day and do something for yourself.